right, this will be, believe it or not, the third time I've tried to record this video. First time I recorded it with the microphone completely muted. Second time, I recorded it with the microphone unplugged. So if you're seeing this now, it's due to a whole lot of trial and error while I'm suffering seasonal allergies, which is why I may end up sounding like I'm underwater. But I think you're going to like this video. So, one of the things that they'll tell you when you first start out as an indie author and you say you want to write a book is they're going to say, you need to write a series because no one buys standalone books. And for the most part, they're right. You know, you're not really lucky enough to be J.D. Salinger, knock it out of the park with Catcher in the Rye. And he still wrote more than one book. So, if you're thinking about writing a series, you have a choice to make. Are you going to write a planned series? So, off the top of my head, a good example would be Harry Potter. There's a beginning, there's an end, it's spaced out across 8 books, and you know how the story's going to end. Then you have the open-ended series. So for that, think Cole Harper, my series, or maybe a little slightly more well-known series, the Jack Reacher series. And if you're thinking about writing a series, you have to choose which one you're going to do. This video, we're going to talk about the open-ended series. So Jack Reacher, Cole Harper. I actually ranked higher than Jack Reacher on Amazon for a little while. That was cool. Side note, but if you're thinking about writing a series that could, in theory, go on forever, you need to understand what you're signing up for. Because it sounds great. You create this character that readers love, and you just drop them into new stories over and over and over. And you build this world that just keeps expanding. But what nobody tells you is at the beginning of these open-ended series, you're not creating an opportunity for yourself. You're creating a death trap if you're not careful. Because these things don't come with a roadmap. There's no finish line you're aiming for. It's just you and a blank page with a character that you are going to be stuck with for a very long time. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through some of the things to look out for so that you can keep it fresh, you can keep yourself invested, and you're not going to lose the thing that made it a good story in the first place. So it all starts with this statement that it sounds wrong, but you need to hear me all the way out. Your plot almost doesn't matter. And I know that sounds insane, especially if you're someone who outlines very heavily. But when you're 5 books into the same character, it becomes pretty clear that readers aren't showing up just for the story. They're showing up for the character, the person who's living through these stories. So you can send this person, this character, into a jungle, a war zone, a boardroom, a political conspiracy, and it won't matter because what really matters is whether or not your protagonist can carry that weight over and over without starting to feel stale. Now, let's talk about Jack Reacher for a second. Open-ended series by Lee Child. Now, this guy can walk into any random town. He gets into a fight. There's usually a cop involved, and next thing you know, he's walking off into the sunset. But people read these books. They fell in love with it. This is a best-selling series. And it's not because the setup to the story is mind-blowing every time. It's because they know who Jack Reacher is. They believe in Jack Reacher. And that kind of believability isn't something that you can fake. You know, when Lee Child started writing the Reacher series, he didn't start with this generic, shallow character and just let him get deeper over time. If you're going to create a character for an open-ended series, they need to feel like they've already lived an entire life before your first book even starts. Because eventually, your character becomes the series, right? It's the Jack Reacher series. They're the Cole Harper adventures. They're the Vince Flynn has the Mitch Rapp series. Now, there's another curveball that it's either going to kill you or it's going to be your best friend. And it's time. Now, I don't mean how many years or days or weeks or months pass in the story. It's, are your characters aging in real time? If so, cool. But you better be ready to deal with the consequences that come with that decision. Because we're humans. If your character's human, they get real physical wear and tear. They get emotional baggage. And you may even come across some legacy questions later on. Now, you can take another route and freeze time altogether. You kind of fudge the years. And if one book happens right after the next, but nobody really gets older, that works too. But there is a trade-off, because eventually your readers will start doing the math. They'll be like, why is this guy still in his 30s when he's been in more shootouts than John Wick? And that starts breaking the suspension of disbelief without you even realizing it. And I've seen authors try to reverse engineer their way out of that by making their series suddenly self-aware, or they'll reset the timeline. But the readers notice it. And once the timeline stops making sense, the story stops being captivating. It stops being interesting. So whichever one you choose, whether you want your character to age in real time over your series, or maybe it's a short series that happens over a year, a few months, or a handful of years, or you freeze time, it's irrelevant, it's just adventure after adventure, story after story, either one is fine, but you have to make a plan for it. And you don't want to get caught pretending that time doesn't matter, because it really does. The next one is this really big myth of escalation. Everybody likes to think that the only way to keep a series alive is to keep making the stakes bigger. You got to have the Michael Bay experience get bigger every time, with more global conspiracies, more explosions, higher body counts. But the truth is, after a while, that stops working. And if you don't believe me, look at the Fast and the Furious. These guys started off as some street racing hijackers, jacking some 18-wheelers and stealing DVD players. And now they're in space working for the CIA. Or whatever they're doing. It's been like 27 movies so far. But once your character has faced death a few dozen times, it doesn't really hit the same anymore. And your readers will start to tune it out. What you need isn't bigger. You need deeper. So what's at stake internally to the character? What does this cost the character emotionally? What part of their pre-established worldview starts to crack? Who do they lose? What do they start losing faith in? That's the kind of thing that keeps people coming back. It's not the action, it's not the spectacle, it's the cost. And by the time you're 5, 10 books or movies in, the cost needs to start accumulating. That's one of the things that you see way later on in the Fast and Furious movie series is all of a sudden Dominic Toretto has a brother. Never heard of him before the 10th or 9th or 27th movie. But now that's a thing. Sure, okay. And he's worried about his son getting kidnapped and dying, or losing his brother and dealing with the internal battle of that. That's what made people keep watching, even though they're terrible movies. The cost has to accumulate, and you have to have a different form of pressure. If that makes sense, cool. Now, there's a balancing act that you need to worry about with an open-ended series. It's that your readers, they want what's familiar, but they also want to be surprised at the same time. They don't want the same book every time, but they also don't want the character to suddenly start feeling like a stranger. It's this tightrope that the longer your series goes on, the harder it becomes to walk it. And I've seen writers overcorrect because they'll get so afraid of repeating themselves that they'll reinvent the character from scratch every single book. It's got a new tone, or there's new emotional baggage. And sometimes they want to tell a different story and they end up switching genres, and it destroys the whole flow of the series. And on the flip side, if you're playing it too safe, every book starts to feel like a rerun. You lose the tension and the fun, and that's when you start realizing the story's not going anywhere, and neither is the character. The trick is you don't change the problems or make the problems bigger. You change the shape of the problems. You let the situations evolve. You let the character evolve, become someone. But that has to take place within the series. It can't just be, oh, in this weird gap between the end of book 7 and the beginning of book 8, something changed and now it's a different guy. You have to let the choices get a little murkier. You don't want to reinvent your characters. You just want to put them under new kinds of pressure and then see who they become or how they react while they're under that pressure. And then there's another part that nobody wants to admit. Eventually, you're going to get tired. You're going to hit this wall where you don't really care as much about the next story. You know, you've done the voice, you've done the action beats, you've done the twists, and you're halfway through a draft and you're suddenly thinking, why the hell am I even writing this one? And it's not really a sign of failure, it's just reality. The real mistake is when you pretend it's not happening, because you'll start phoning it in and the readers are going to feel it. And even if the plot is technically solid and you've checked all the right boxes, the spark's gone. And once that's gone, you can't fake it. And if you can, it's really hard. So you have to figure out a way to stay in love with your character, with the tone, with the risk, with the genre. And if you can't do that, you need to start figuring out a finish line, or your readers are just going to walk away before you ever get there. You see, writing an open-ended series, it's not as much about planning ahead as it is managing the momentum and the fatigue, and managing the way your character evolves without losing the soul of the character or the soul of the story. And it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But if you can pull it off, it's probably the most rewarding thing you can do. But the key is really honest. You know, it's being honest about who your character really is. It's being honest about how far you can stretch them. It's being honest about how long you can stay in the world you created for them without running out of gas. Because open-ended does not mean directionless. It doesn't mean they're immortal. You know, Jack Reacher in the first book, he's in his 30s. In the later books, he's in his 50s. And he's got some gray, he's got some stubble, he's got new scars. He moves a little slower. He has to approach problems differently. And that's why people show up, because he's real. Eventually, Jack Reacher's going to retire under a bridge somewhere. Or die. Who knows? But you have to pay attention to these things if you're going to write an open-ended series. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about planned series. So your 8-book series, your trilogies, your anthologies that are 10 books long, like The Last Kingdom or Game of Thrones that Martin really screwed the pooch on. Because I don't know. I don't want to get into that right now. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas about open-ended series, drop them in the comments. I read all of them. I reply to all of them. And I really appreciate you guys watching. I really appreciate you guys being subscribers. I took a little weird hiatus because life got in the way, got a little sick, had some really bad flus running through the house. And so I didn't get to drop as many videos as I wanted to over these past couple of weeks. But hopefully that's all going different now in the future. But next time, we're talking closed-ended series, planned series. Again, thanks for liking, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.